Friendship ranks very high in the Bible. Jonathan was a great warrior. He was really a good man with a sword. Jonathan loved David as himself. And it came to pass, when he had made an end to speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. So how's it going? I want to talk today about friendships. Have friendships. If you go to Proverbs, don't go there. I'm going to go through the first three Proverbs here. Proverbs 18:24. A man that has friends must show himself friendly. And there is a friend that sticks closer to a brother. Now, I don't have any brothers or no sisters. My mother had me, and then things happened. She got sick, and that was the end of that. So I always depended on my cousins to be around people of the same nature, background. But the Good News Bible also adds to that. It says, friends are more loyal than others. That's interesting. Proverbs 27:17. And I remember, Scott, you gave us a whole sermonette on this. Iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. So if you have a close friend, he'll help you out. He'll say things. Oh, don't wear that, or, don't say that. Or say this. That's a good thing. But they're good friends. I've had really good friends. I've had some fabulous people that I have known and I could call upon. But if you go to the Song of Solomon, and basically this Song of Solomon is about a young married couple and how they are Twitter-pated. That's a fancy word for man, they are in love. They are goo-goo over each other. And it starts out in 5 and 8. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him, I am sick of love. That's the Old English. But what it should we read is, I'm weak from passion. Weak. She just thinks about him all the time. I can relate to that. Got married, happiest times of my life. Really was. And it goes on, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? O thou fairest among women, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? That thou dost so charge us. So if you drop down now to the 5:16, Song of Solomon. It says, his mouth is most sweet, yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. Friend. Now, I've heard this a lot lately in the last few years, but young married couples, especially those from Hollywood and things like that, are on TV, and they'll hug each other and say, oh, this is my friend. This is my friend. And then it goes on, it says, O daughters of Jerusalem. This is a woman speaking to other women and saying, this is my friend. So with those three, and there's more of verses about friendship and friends, friendship ranks very high in the Bible. I was kind of amazed. Friendships, not relatives, but friends. You know, it's like the old saying goes, you can't choose your relatives, but you can choose your friends, right? Right. So today I want to talk about friendships. And I want to talk about, in particularly, two men whose environment was constantly changing. They were always something going on in their lives. And the dynamics of their social relationship seems to be always tested. That's a good word. It's good for all of us to think about that. The dynamics of our social relationships with other people, with our friends. You know, see? Now, David, who was eventually king of Israel, and Jonathan, the son of Saul, and Jonathan was always loyal to David. He was a neat guy. And I've gone through this and tried to put together, because the story of Jonathan is scattered all over, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And it was, it's just a lot of work sometimes to put things together where they're understandable. Now, personal dynamics, like, what am I talking about? Well, who's the boss? You know, in your house or where you work or where you have to go, you know, and do. And does that change? Is it going to change? Who decides things in your environment? This sickness, this COVID, that changed a lot. Changed a lot. Here a guy gets on the airplane just last week. He gets on an airplane, he won't wear a mask. And the stewardess says, well, you have to wear a mask. Well, he broke her ribs, punching her. Stupid. I'm going to tell you, that kind of makes me wonder about things, dynamics in his environment. What kind of person was he? Drunk? It doesn't matter. Also, people who are gone a lot. They're not around. I thought of truck drivers. Truck drivers get on their, I've known them, they get on their truck, make a run, come back. They may be gone several days. It's hard on their family. But they live with it and probably make a good living. In old age, I'm going to tell you, it changes everything. You know, it really sometimes is a nice thing. I have people open doors for me, help me. I appreciate that. But I'll tell you, I'm taking these classes now so I can stand on one foot, so I can walk. It changes your whole life. But you're all facing it. It's coming with a vengeance, either that or death. So, yeah, let's smile. Well, speaking of death, what about death of a loved one? Your parents, you can probably remember that if you have that happen. We had the Dell passed, and that's a pressure that we put on ourselves. We think about that. I do. I think about it. What about children? Boy, you want to talk about a change in your life when you have a child and you take that baby home or have it there, and your life is over. You know why? Because you're getting up and helping your wife, guys. And women, you're going to get up and change that baby and plug it in. Feed it. That's life. What about money? Money's a good one. More or less? I read a story, this is a long time ago, of a man who won the lottery in California. And within 4 years, he was broke. It was like 20 million, which is, 25, 30 years ago. That was a lot. But he's broke, living in a trailer out in the desert by Palmdale. So, I don't know. More or less, it makes a difference. And war in Ukraine. Man, it's like, I remember us seeing pictures of Vietnam, and I miss Vietnam. I barely missed it by 2 days. And I'd see these guys out there trucking through the jungle. And now I see people in Ukraine, little children, and it's awful. All about what? And finally, dynamics, religion. Religion, some are called and some are not. Some are motivated, some are not. And things come and go. People come and go. And it's even more in a large congregation. Some of these churches. I've been told that there are churches here that they grow and then they shrink. They grow and then they shrink. And it depends. But all these dynamics are working in your life. See? You have to face it. So, who was David's friend? Who is this guy, Jonathan? Jonathan is from the tribe of Benjamin. His clan was Matarites. I didn't know that until I looked it up. I didn't know they called them within like a tribe, like Benjamin, that they have different groups. Didn't know that. Jonathan's godfather was Kish. His father was Saul. You know about Saul. He was the first king of Israel. And so Jonathan was his father, his daddy. Now, I tried to group information about Jonathan and his relations to other people and things by topic. Okay? So that's how I did it. And first topic, Jonathan was a great warrior. He was really a good man with a sword. In 1 Samuel 13:3, and Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba. And the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet altogether, all the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. So Saul, this is his personality. He's kind of tooting his own horn, so to speak, blow the trumpets. But that's what happened. Now, that's 13:3. Go to 14:1, 1 Samuel, and I'm going to move fast here because of time. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan the son of Saul said unto the young men that bare his armor, come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison, or campment, all it was a camp, that is on the other side. But he told not his father. So he said, okay, let's go out. Let's stir the pot, so to speak. In 1 Samuel 14:6, if you'll drop down. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of those uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint, now get this, there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. So he's banking on they're going to kill a few or they may do a lot. And his armor bearer said unto him, do all this in your heart, turn you Behold, I am with you according to your heart. Then said Jonathan, Behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. So we're going to go up here and show ourselves to them. And if they say unto us, Tarry until we come to you, then we shall stand still in our place, and we will not go up unto them. Okay, but if they say, Come unto us, then we will go up. Now here's the point. For the Lord has delivered them unto our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. So he's got a plan. They're either going to come down to him, to Jonathan, or they're going to go up. But they're going to wait for those people they're going to attack to wait, to make a decision. And both them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they had hid themselves. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer, and said, Come up to us, and we will show you a thing. Well, come on up, we're going to get you. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them unto the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and the armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and the armor bearer he killed after him. So he killed people that weren't quite dead yet. That's the armor bearer. Okay, if you look at battles fought in England and Europe in the time when they wore armor, that's how they worked. That's how you fought a battle. You had people carrying these small knives, long and narrow, and they would follow behind the warrior, the prince, the leader, and they would make sure those people are dead. And it's the same thing here. It's interesting how warfare continues. Okay, so we can see there, this guy's got fortitude. He's out there saying, come, you come on down or come up. And that's what he did. He was a warrior. And there's other places. Okay, another topic is Jonathan loved David at himself. He loved David. Okay, Jonathan loved David as himself. And it came to pass, when he had made an end to speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day. He took David. He's a king. He can do whatever he wants. And would let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant. Now, this is the first covenant made by David and Jonathan, because he loved him as his own. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David. So this is somewhat symbolic, but I'm pretty sure, I'm guessing, that this is after David killed Goliath. See? Remember, he tried on the armor and nothing would fit, and carrying that big heavy sword. That's why he took his sling. So this is after that. But Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his garments, even his sword and his bow, and to his girdle. So I'll be frank, he stripped down to his underwear and t-shirt and gave all of it to David. He said, here. And I think also, this is my own thinking, that the act shows that Jonathan respected David. Why? Because he was already anointed to be the next king. You know, Jonathan could have said, but I'm the son of Saul. I should be the next king. But he didn't do that. He had enough brains and fortitude and insight to give it all, his armor, to David. And he knew, because he was already anointed, and we'll look at that, to be the future king. Now think about this. David is going to be king over Israel at the resurrection. We might be working for David. Wouldn't that be great to know this, how he operated? And he's quite a fellow. Okay. So he gave the armor to David. Jonathan did. So let's go to the next point. Jonathan is a prime example of love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. See if I can do this right this time. In Zechariah 8:16, it says, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak you every man the truth to his neighbor." And this is God speaking. "Execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates." See, you have to be truthful to your neighbor, be honest. "And let none of your imagine evil in your hearts against your neighbor." Scott was talking about that. "And love no false oath." Be truthful. "For all these things do I hate, says the Lord." So these are examples of things we have to do. Now, follow that up. The New Testament, 1 John 3:10. "In this the children," that's 1 John 3:10. "In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil, whosoever does not righteousness is not of God." You know, I've told you before about your head games. You got to think these things through. And it's hard not to be upset with someone for a long time, but you got to give it up and function in your environment. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble. "Neither he that loves not his brother." In 3:11, 1 John 3:11. "For this is a message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another." From the beginning. What's he talking about? Well, I didn't write it down, but I remember it's talking about Cain killing his brother. From the second chapter in the first book of the Bible. See, from the beginning, things happen. Greed, unhappiness, whatever. One thing leads to another. Now, another point. Jonathan recognized David as God's anointed and future king. I said that. The anointing of David. So, this is the anointing of David. In 1 Samuel 16 and 1, 16:1. "And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel?" Don't you understand? There's a question mark there. "Fill your horn with oil and go, and I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons." So drop down to 16:11. "And Samuel said to Jesse, Are there any children? And he said, There remains yet a youngest, and behold, he keeps the sheep." Now this is, talk about degrading. Oh, he keeps the sheep. He's my youngest. You know, he's not mature. "And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, and I will not sit down till he comes hither. And he sent and brought him in Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him. So I often wondered about that. Did Samuel hear? How did he hear that? He didn't see God or an angel. He just heard these things. But it happened. And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramoth. So that's how it happened. So people had to know that David was anointed to be the next king over Israel. Not Jonathan, not anything to do with Saul and his family. He was a disappointment. Now, let's look a little closer at Jonathan. And I titled this, Saul Drives David Away, but Jonathan Restores Their Friendship. Okay, let's start here. 1 Samuel 19:1. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and all his servants. So here's the king, that they should kill David. He said all his people, all his staff, he said, I've made up my mind, kill David, I'm sick of him, and he is taking my authority. I can imagine that's what he thought. In 1 Samuel 19:2, but Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David, and Jonathan told David. Now, here we go. Talk about dynamics changing. Saying, Saul my father seeks to kill you. Now therefore I pray you, take heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will commune with my father. So in other words, I'm going to talk to my dad about you. And what I see, that will I tell you. So a little, going to see what's going to happen. What if Jonathan can straighten his dad up? Now, I wonder at this point, and I don't know, this is my speculation, that if Saul just had problems, mental health problems, why would you stand up in front of all your entourage, all your people, all your helpers, all your staff, and say, I want this guy killed? It just doesn't make sense, but that happened. And Jonathan spoke good of David until Saul, his father. Now let me read that again. And Jonathan spoke good of David until Saul, his father, and said unto him, Let not the king sin against your servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against you, and because his works have been to threeward very good. For he did put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all of Israel, and saw it, and it did rejoice. Therefore, when will you sin against innocent blood, to slay David without cause? See, he pointed this out to his dad, which was on the edge. So he's taken a chance. And Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, As the Lord lives, he shall not be slain. So he backtracked. Why did he do that? Jonathan. Pretty cool. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all those things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in the presence as in times past. So Jonathan fixed up the problem with his dad and David. And so everything's okay now. So let's take another topic. Jonathan makes a second covenant Remember I told you that there was be two covenants, one they made before and now this one. And this is found in 1 Samuel 20:1. And David fled from Noath in Ramon and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? Where is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life?" In Samuel 20:2, and he said unto him, "God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but he will show it to me. And why should my father hide this thing from me?" So it's not so. He assures David that he's safe. And it goes on, and I want to go through this entire scenario because it's important. 1 Samuel 20:3, and David swore moreover and said, "Thy father certainly knows that I have found grace in your eyes." And he said, "Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as the soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." So he knows that just this man can change his mind and he can be taken. Then said Jonathan to David, "Whatsoever thy soul desires, I will even do it for thee." And David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon." And I'm wondering if that's the Passover. "That I should not fail to set with the king at meat, but let it go." See, they would eat the Passover meal. "That I may hide myself in the field unto the third day at even. If the father at all misses me, then say, David earnestly asks leave of me, that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, and there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he says thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he is very wrought or mad, then be sure that evil is determined by him. Therefore, thou shalt deal kindly with your servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into the covenant of the Lord with thee." Now see, they're making this covenant and they're making rules to understand what's going on between the two of them. They're friends, friendship. "Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, and why should you bring me to the Father?" And Jonathan said, "Far be it from thee. For if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon you, David, then what should not I tell you?" Why wouldn't I tell you, David? And they're trying to sort their problem. And that's where I wanted to go to this, because their conversation is somewhat hard to understand. I know that. But they talked about serious things that were embarrassing. See? What a time to live. Then said David to Jonathan, "Who shall tell me, or what will your father answer thee roughly?" And Jonathan said unto David, "Come and let us go out into the field." And they went out, both of them, to the field. Now see, Jonathan instigated this. And Jonathan said to David, "O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow, any time, or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, and when I send not unto you, and show it to you, the Lord do so, and very much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do thee evil, I will show it to you." He says, I promise you, I will, by the covenant we're building here, I will show it to you and send you away. that thou may go in peace. And the Lord be with you, as he hath been with my father. And thou shalt not only while yet I live show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not. Now, Jonathan, this is 2015. But also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house. He's asking David a favor, he says, and I'm going to get to this at the end. But note this is important. But also you shall not cut off my kindness of my house forever. That's Jonathan talking to David. Okay? No, not when the Lord has cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. And Jonathan caused David to swear again. He said, promise me you won't forget me or my house, because he loved him. Jonathan loved David. They had a friendship going. For he loved him as he loved his soul. Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon. See, when we have the holy days, some holy days, most of them, you walk outside here and the moon's coming up. It's a full moon. And thou shalt be missed because thy seat was empty. See, he will be missed. Now there's other points, and I'm not going to go there. Jonathan asked David to show kindness and mercy again. Jonathan attempts David to his father. Jonathan tells David to flee, and it goes on. But let's look at another one. Jonathan is obedient to his father, and he's killed in battle. So this is when Jonathan and Saul and their company of men go down to fight the Philistines. It starts in 1 Samuel 31:1. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down, slain at Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. In other words, they had them on the run. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and his third son, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sorely wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, draw your sword and thrust me through. See, this is Saul. He says, kill me, lest the uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took his sword and fell upon it. And when the armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise on his own sword and died. 13:6. So Saul died, and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer, and all the men, get that? All the men that were with him that same day together. And when the men of Israel that were on the side of the valley, and they that were on the other side Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt them. So it was just a rout. They pushed them out, and the men fled with the women. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols. So they had these temples. This is awful things. And among the people And they put their armor in the house, and they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. And when the inhabitants of Jezreel, Gilead, heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul. Now this is pretty neat. And all the valiant men rose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the body of his sons from the wall of Beth Shan and came to Bezalel and burned them there. So the bodies were so disfigured, I'm thinking out loud here, that they just burned the bodies. And they took their bones and buried them under the tree of Jezebel and fasted 7 days because of what they did. And that's how Jonathan died and his dad. They died together. Now, we still haven't finished with David. David's deep lament on how the might has fallen. Now, this is written by David, and it's about his friends that were fallen, who were killed. And David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. He also bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Moreover, it is written in the book of Jasher. Now let's go to, it's right here, we're just following it, but 2 Samuel 1:19. The beauty of Israel is slain upon the high places. How are the mighty fallen? Tell it not to Gath, publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. So they would have a big celebration. He said, don't publish it, don't let them know. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain. And he's talking about the Philistines. Upon you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away. The shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. From blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. So he has this hope for those people, Jonathan and Saul. And now let's keep going here. In 2 Samuel 1:23. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Now, that's David writing about this man that tried to kill him and his son. You see that? How forgiving, how David operates. He's quite a fellow. I mean, he didn't hold a grudge. Can you imagine writing this down? He said, were lovely and pleasant in their lives. He threatened. How many times did Saul threaten? I don't know. I didn't count that. Ye daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet, in other delights, who put on ornaments of gold upon your apparel. It's a just different thinking process. He's not out after vengeance. David's not going to look at it that way. He has a different outlook. Remember, he received God's Spirit, and it never left him. See? In 125, how are the mighty fallen in the midst of battle? O Jonathan, thou wast slain in these high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant thou hast been unto me. Your love for me was wonderful, passing the love of women. See? That's Jonathan. Really cool. This is really good writing. How are the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perish. If you can look at the TV news and just say that, I wished it would be over there. It's just terrible. Now, I want to point out another thing about David. They made these covenants. I told you. I led you through the two. And David kept his promise. Okay. In 2 Samuel 4:3, and the Beerothrites, that's a funny name, Beerothrites, I'll wait for you. 2 Samuel 4:3. This is where David fulfills his promise, one of his promises to his friend. How many people would do that? Because he didn't have to do it, but he did. They fled from Githam's, and were sojourners until this day. Okay, 4:4, 2 Samuel. And Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan. The tidings means they found out they were both dead. They were killed in action. Out of Jezreel. And his nurse, this Mephibosheth. And the nurse took him up and fled. And this is Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson. And this nurse took off. And she made haste to flee. Then he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. Okay, so I'm thinking, now here I go again, that it was probably a spinal accident. The nurse dropped the baby, the kid, and maybe they were going someplace they shouldn't, but they were running for their lives, and the kid was lame. His feet, he couldn't walk. I can relate to that. So that's what happened. Okay, move down a few years in 2 Samuel 9:11. Okay, then said Ziba unto the king. This guy said unto the king David. He said, according to all that the Lord the king has commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. Whatever you told me, David, I'm going to do it. That's cool. That's this guy I'd like to hang around with. And Mephibosheth too said the king shall eat. So this handicapped person is going to eat at David's table as one of the king's sons. Okay? And there's more. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all that dwell in the house of Ziba were servants to Mephibosheth. So David set it up where that Jonathan's son would eat at his table for as long as he was the king. And Mephibosheth, this is 9:13, dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat. This is so neat. For he did eat continually at the king's table and was lame in both his feet. Wow. David promised Jonathan that he would take care of his family, and he did. And that's what friendships, that's why I gave this. Friendships is about love for one another. And what's happening overseas is going to affect us. When I used to keep up with it, I know wheat would be $4 or $5. They're talking wheat now to be $10 a bushel. You going to buy a lot of bread? No. And I read you Zechariah 8:16, things that we need to do. I read that to you. And what God, he says, well, I hate this, I hate this, in 1 John. And dynamics in your family here, this group, and out in computer land. These dynamics are bound to change. Well, they are changing already for me. I'm having trouble walking, and there are other things going to happen. You know, if you pay $10 a bushel or more for a bushel of wheat, you know, things are going to change. If you're paying $5, $6, $7, $8, $7 is what it is, or $8, and over in England, imperial gallon, things are going to change. You might not be able to come to church. You might not be able to do this or that, but things may go on. But I'm just saying, this whatever, you know, whatever you do here, whatever you do in your life, keep doing it. Understand that. It's a principle of being a Christian. That's what it is. So I hope you had a little bit more understanding why David loved Jonathan, and Jonathan loved him, because they could trust each other. They could depend on each other. They could convey their ideas to each other and work it out. Not get all haughty and have to leave or throw a fit, but they can talk and have understanding one for another.
You have received this information based upon the Word of God. Every additional topic concerning the truth, which originates in Scripture, builds understanding leading to salvation. We hope you will personally review the Scriptures cited in this presentation. God will teach you if you ask Him. Until next time, good day.